Hello, everyone. My name's Jamie, and I'm the COR coordinator here at the Continuing Care Safety Association. Thank you for joining us for 2025's External Auditor Review. In consideration of everyone's schedules, the CCSA has decided to host the External Auditor Review as another pre-recorded webinar. There will be an option to share feedback at the end, and we invite everyone to do so. So let's dive in. We're going to start off with a land acknowledgement to recognize the historical and ongoing presence of Indigenous peoples. We acknowledge the lands we share with the original people, including the many First Nations, Métis, the Inuit, and all other ancestors who made this land their home. As we gather within these territories, we are grateful for all that sustains us and provides for us at this time. We are thankful for new beginnings, new life, and opportunities. In the essence of reconciliation, we acknowledge these territorial lands of Treaties 6, 7, and 8. What are your expectations from this webinar? Consider the key takeaways you're looking for and keep them in mind throughout the session. If any of your questions remain unanswered or you think of something after the webinar, please reach out to the CCSA COR team. On our agenda for today, we're going to look at conducting audits in 2025, 2025 audit tool updates, partnerships QA, common errors found through the QA review process, and external auditor standards. So let's start with conducting audits in 2025. 2025 audits will continue to be conducted with DIO, documentation, interviews, and observations in that order. Documentation review should be based on the previous 12 months worth of documentation. Nothing has changed here from last year. When conducting audits in 2025, audits can take place on-site or remotely. A combination of on-site and remote methods can be used, which must be decided between the employer and the auditor. Please note that remote observations must be pre-approved by the CCSA. The application can be found on our website. All audits will continue to be completed using AuditSoft. Audits completed in the old Excel tool are no longer accepted. An AuditSoft license will be provided to CCSA auditors free of charge. Why AuditSoft, you ask? CCSA has partnered with AuditSoft because we are confident it will make the process quicker and more streamlined. AuditSoft provides a self-service support site, and there's even a help button built right into the tool if you need assistance. If you do not have previous experience with AuditSoft or you haven't already taken your training, we strongly encourage auditors to take advantage of the free e-training through SafetyVantage. It's a great way to get started. Let's go over some key points about licenses and AuditSoft. There are two types of licenses within AuditSoft: an evaluation license. This is a practice or mock audit to help you get familiar with the software layout. To request one, simply type evaluation in the legal name field after selecting CCSA as the certifying partner. These requests are approved as soon as they are received and do not require pre-approval. They are valid for 3 months. A real license. Before this can be approved, the audit must be registered on the CCSA website. We will provide you with the organization's legal name for the request, so be sure to enter it correctly with the proper spelling. Licenses will not be approved if the employer's trade name has been used. Remember, there is no charge for obtaining an AuditSoft license or evaluation license. Auditors must submit their audit for QA review through the AuditSoft software using the submission button. After the QA review process is complete, the auditor provides the final audit report PDF to the employer. Auditors will receive the final approved audit PDF from the COR team via the AuditSoft application and will receive an email to let you know that your audit has been finalized and can be released to the employer. To recap, you submit your audit in AuditSoft, and after the QA review process, you will now provide the final audit report PDF to the employer. A well-planned audit sets the foundation for a smooth process and a successful quality assurance review. Let's go over the key resources available to help with audit planning. The CCSA provides a variety of auditor resources which can be found on our website, including AuditSoft fact sheet for employers and auditors, AuditSoft tips for auditors, audit cheat sheet, and the newly updated 2025 audit tool resource. There's requests for information forms such as pre-audit letters and pre-audit meeting agendas, documentation checklists, which can be used for your own reference, as well as sent to the employer in preparation for the audit. There's also a written interview questionnaire application and remote observation application. By taking the time to thoroughly plan your audit using these resources, you can reduce errors, improve efficiency, and make the QA review process much smoother. Proper preparation leads to clearer findings, better recommendations, and an overall more impactful audit. Once your audit is planned, the next step is conducting it efficiently and ensuring smooth submission process. To support you, CCSA provides a variety of auditor resources that can help you at every stage. Other resources on our website include documentation checklists, interview questions, interview instructions, observation checklists, and post-audit meeting agenda. We encourage all auditors to take advantage of these resources, whether electronically or in printed form. Even CCSA's own staff rely on these tools, so don't hesitate to use them as you work through your audit. By utilizing these resources, you can increase efficiency, improve accuracy, and ensure smoother submission and review process. And remember, if you have any questions along the way, the CCSA COR team is always here to help. Finalizing the audit report. Before submitting your audit, it's essential to include all the required appendices, as audits missing these attachments will not be accepted. To ensure a smooth submission process, please double-check that the following items are attached within AuditSoft in the corresponding appendices section: pre-audit letter, organizational chart or charts, pre-audit meeting minutes including an attendance record, post-audit meeting minutes including an attendance record. Once all required documents are attached, review your AuditSoft report. Each section should have a green check mark, and this confirms that all necessary steps have been completed. After verifying everything, the final step is to click Submit, sending your audit to the CCSA COR team for quality assurance review. Taking the time to ensure these attachments are included will help avoid delays and make the review process smoother. Audit QA corrections. Once your audit report has been completed and submitted for review, a quality assurance reviewer will assess your audit and provide detailed feedback or any required revisions. In 2025, the CCSA will be moving away from adding QA comments within the audit report PDF. Auditors will now receive their corrections directly in AuditSoft. To review the feedback, simply log into your AuditSoft account. When you reopen your audit, AuditSoft will automatically bring you to the section needing attention. Notes appear directly below each relevant question. Notes now come in two types. Actionable notes require changes, and once addressed, you can check the box to mark them as resolved. Informational notes require no changes and are just for informational purposes, such as for future audit recommendations. Just acknowledge by checking the box. Be sure to go through each note carefully and don't forget to acknowledge when they are complete. See our e-blast Streamline Your Core Audit Reviews with Audit Exchange for more information. Important notes when making your corrections. Please do not reply directly to comments in your justification notes. Make all corrections in the justification notes. Do not remove your original note, but instead revise it to reflect the necessary changes. If you need clarification, do not hesitate to reach out to the COR team for guidance. Our QA team strives to provide feedback within 7 to 14 days. During peak audit season from November to December, the average turnaround time is closer to 14 days. By carefully following the feedback and making the necessary corrections, you'll help streamline the approval process and move forward successfully. For the purposes of conducting COR audits, auditors must still provide specific examples for audit questions 8.8, which illustrate that the number of RNs, LPNs, and/or first aiders required have been met to verify that individuals are in fact readily available. and also provide an example of a brief description of OHS acceptance if it already exists. For Type A continuing care facilities, while Type A is exempt from the requirements, all other parts of the first aid legislation apply. Therefore, auditors must refer to Alberta OHS Code Schedule 2, Table 6 for medium hazard work, note the number of workers at that site per shift, note how many RNs, LPNs are required per shift to meet the number of workers per shift. Check employee schedules for each shift to see if an RN and or LPN is readily available on each shift. Quantify the amounts found. For example, based on documentation review of employee schedules and OHS Code Schedule 2, Table 6, medium hazard work, 19 workers per shift, 2 RNs were confirmed to be on day, evening, and night shifts, meeting the Type A facility requirement of having the designated number of RNs, first aiders, always readily available. For Type B, senior supportive living, and Type C, publicly funded residential hospice care facilities, if no OHS acceptance exists, use the method above as described for Type A. If no OHS acceptance exists, refer to Alberta OHS Code Schedule 2, Table 6 for medium hazard work. Note the number of workers at the worksite per shift and whether the worksite is close, distant, or isolated from a hospital. Note how many first aiders are required per shift to meet the number of workers. And check employee schedules for each shift to see if the appropriate number of first aiders are readily available. Check first aid certificates of the first aiders found to verify that their certificates are current and not expired. Quantify the amounts found. For example, based on documentation review of employee schedules and first aid certificates, 2 out of 2 intermediate first aiders with current valid certification were confirmed to be on day, evening, and night shifts, meeting the Type B facility requirements for OHS Code Schedule 2, Table 6, medium hazard work, 19 workers per shift at an isolated site. The OHS Code Amendment Regulation 202/2024 was signed as a Ministerial Order Number 2024-12 dated November 28, 2024 and in effect as of December 4, 2024. The OH Code Amendment Regulation changes the wording in Section 181.4 to read, Section 181.4 is amended by striking out medical clinic or physician's office or a nursing home as defined in the Nursing Home Act and substituting medical clinic, physician's office, or nursing home. Section 181.4 of the OHS Code now reads, this section does not apply to a hospital, medical clinic, physician's office, or nursing home where a physician, nurse, or licensed practical nurse is readily available. For the purposes of the OHS Code, continuing care Type A facilities are considered nursing homes, while hospitals, medical clinics, physicians' offices, and nursing homes where a physician, nurse, or licensed practical nurse is always readily available are exempt from the OHS Code requirements in Section 181. All other sections in Part 11 must be met. Continuing care Type B and Type C employers must meet all the requirements in the OHS Code Part 11. Continuing care Type B and C employers may also apply for an acceptance to adopt an alternative approach that meets or exceeds the legislated requirement. The OHS publication applying for an OHS acceptance or approval can be found at Applying for an OHS acceptance or approval. Violence and harassment. Under the updated legislation that came into effect on March 31st, 2025, there are minor changes to violence and harassment. Violence and harassment questions have now been combined within the audit tool. There is now an extra point clarifying Health and Safety Committee and Health and Safety Representative or workers if there is no Health and Safety Committee or Health and Safety Representative. The employer must review the violence and harassment plan required by Section 390 in any of the following circumstances. When an incident of violence or harassment indicates a review is required, Where there is a change to the work or the work site that could affect the potential for violence or harassment to occur. If the Joint Health and Safety Committee or Health and Safety Representative requests a review, or at least every 3 years. When carrying out the review, the employer must consult with the Joint Health and Safety Committee if there is one, the Health and Safety Representative if there is one, affected workers as far as reasonably practical to do so if there is no Joint Health and Safety Committee or Health and Safety Representative. When a worker is treated or referred by a physician under Section 391.2, and if the treatment sessions occur during regular work hours, the worker is deemed to be at work during that treatment. Since violence and harassment plans have been combined, Audit Question 3.11 and 3.12 within the audit tool have been combined, which is now just 3.11, and 3.13 has been moved to 3.12. This means that the plan and review questions are now just in 3.11 and 3.12. Common errors. In this section, we will review common errors identified through the QA process. Partnership Standard 1.15.1.3. Ensure auditors provide the correct validation for the score awarded. When completing your audit, it's essential to follow the audit question guidelines and ensure your justification notes align with the required validation methods. Some key points to remember. Double check the specified validation method. Do not go outside what is outlined in the audit questions, documentation, interviews, observations, or a combination of methods. Clearly indicate the results for each type of validation technique. If multiple methods are used, explain how each contributed to your score. Examples of proper validation. For example, Audit Question 1.1 focuses only on documentation review of the written health and safety policy. Audit Question 2.10 only conduct interviews with hazard assessment leads. Audit Question 6.3 use both documentation review and interviews with managers and supervisors. By carefully following these guidelines, you'll ensure consistency, accuracy, and compliance of your audit responses. Partnership Standards 1.15.1.1. Ensure auditors follow the question guidelines. When completing your audit, it's essential to follow the audit question guidelines to ensure your justification notes are accurate and aligned with the required validation methods. Always double check the audit question guidelines for the types of validation methods required, DIO, the question content criteria, what specific information must be included, the types of documentation to review and what to look for, which employee levels or types to interview, what to observe during the audit process, and how to properly score the findings, acceptable sampling methods, and when NA may be applied. Justification must always be included when using NA. By sticking to the required validation methods and ensuring your justification notes align with the guidelines, you'll help ensure accuracy, consistency, and compliance in your audit. Partnership Standards 1.15.1.6. Ensure auditor notes include quantification. One of the most common revisions required by the Quality Assurance Review is the lack of quantification in documentation and observation-based validation methods. Quantification is the act of counting in data gathering to create quantities. The quantities then form a numerical value, for example, a fraction, 8 out of 12, which represents the positive indicators met and justifies how the auditor arrived at the score awarded. Quantification is not the percentage awarded by AuditSoft. Restating the score as quantification will not be accepted. For example, awarded 5 out of 5 based on 100% positive indicators. Your justification notes must provide information on why that question received that percentage or score. What is proper quantification? How many documents the auditor reviewed? For example, 8 out of 12 documents reviewed contain positive indicators. It could be the number of documents reviewed that met the question guidelines, providing X out of X required criteria that were present in a policy or process, or providing the number of legislative requirements that were met, or providing the number of observations that were positive or the number of sites which positive observations were made. Quantification is required for all documentation and observation-based questions. Even if only one document was reviewed or one observation was made, quantification must be included. For example, 1 out of 1. Quantification is not required for interview questions. However, as a best practice, auditors are encouraged to assess on a case-by-case basis if an added cohort breakdown brings value to the employer to support specific suggestions for improvement, and if so, include a cohort breakdown of the positive response rate. By incorporating clear and accurate quantification, you will strengthen your audit justifications and reduce the need for revisions. Partnership Standard 1.15.1.2. Ensure auditor notes justify the score awarded. Your justification note and quantification should explain the percentage of positive indicators. As previously mentioned, restating the score that was awarded is not accepted. Auditors must ensure the justification note explains the score awarded by including quantification and relevant examples, both positive and negative. For example, the score awarded was 75% and 8 out of 10 points were awarded for question 1.1. Auditor reviewed job descriptions for the 4 applicable employee levels and determined that 3 out of 4 levels had responsibilities written. Supervisors did not have written responsibilities. Examples of the health and safety responsibilities included examples of senior manager responsibilities, examples of manager responsibilities, and examples of worker responsibilities. And remember, you must also explain any use of NA as specified in the question guidelines if you NA a question. Partnership Standard 1.15.3. Ensure auditor's notes do not include contradictory information. A contradiction occurs when evidence or statements in the audit report conflict with each other, creating inconsistencies in findings. Auditors must ensure there are no contradictions between one audit question and another, or contradictions between one element and another. 5 points are deducted per question when contradictions exist between one question and another. 15 points are deducted per instance when contradictions existing between one element and another are identified. Some common contradictions that we find are awarding full marks and then awarding no marks later for related questions. Legislation not deducting points for a part or system that does not exist, and or inconsistent scoring between a series of interrelated questions. Quantification, for example, multiple quantifications within the same justification note that contradict the score awarded. Within the competency process, awarding no points for 5.7, for example, due to a lack of a competency process, and then awarding full points in 5.18 for completed assessments. Hazard assessment leads, for example, only identifying and verifying training records for one hazard assessment lead in 2.8, and then interviewing multiple hazard assessment leads in 2.10. 2.8 should verify training for the exact number of workers identified as leading the formal hazard assessment process. However, a smaller number of leads may be interviewed for 2.10 if not all hazard assessment leads are available, such as 10 hazard assessment leads identified in 2.8 and only 5 were interviewed for 2.10. Partnership Standards 1.15.1.5. Ensure auditors include specific examples details to support their findings. Auditors should use specific details and examples to support their findings. Restating the question or the question guidelines as the only example isn't sufficient. Specific examples should be based on what was included in the documentation reviewed, interviews conducted, or what was observed. Documentation questions should include short, direct quotations from the organization's policy, procedure, or process, which are relevant to the audit question and questions guidelines. Please do not copy and paste large sections of employer documentation into your audit report. Interview justification notes should include responses from interviewees. Direct quotations are preferred, but paraphrasing is acceptable. Remember to specify which group's responses are coming from. specifically for interview questions with multiple employee levels and specific guideline requirements. Observation justification notes should include where and what the auditor observed. For control questions, which employee level did you see and doing what task? For each of these, ensure to include both positive and negative findings to ensure you have explained the quantification and the final score awarded. Partnership Standard 2.2.7. The following data must be included in the audit report. Employer profile, brief description of the type of operations conducted by the employer. The employer profile / brief description should be included in the employer company profile section within AuditSoft. In the employer company profile section, please include information about the organization such as the type of work conducted, including positions and key locations, a brief overview of the organization's operations and history, how many sites in total, how many employees in total, and any new sites in the scope of the audit. The purpose of the description is to paint a picture of what the day-to-day tasks look like. And for core certification audits only, not recertification or maintenance, please include how long the organization has had a health and safety program. For example, 1 to 3 years, or 3 to 5 years, or 5+ years. We will now look at some errors specific to certain elements, starting with element 2. Questions 2.1 to 2.5 collectively form the foundation of the hazard assessment process by ensuring that all positions, tasks, and associated risks, the hazards, are properly identified and evaluated. Please review the Element 2 and 3 handout located on our website within the Auditor Resources, which expands on how to complete these questions. For 2.1, the first step in hazard assessment is ensuring all jobs positions in the organization are documented. This includes reviewing job descriptions, organizational charts, and formal hazard assessments to confirm completeness. Sampling is not permitted for this question. Once we have identified all positions, each position must have a list of associated tasks. The documentation should include tasks for every position, ensuring no tasks are missed. Due to the word each, sampling is not permitted for this question. In question 2.3, this step ensures that the tasks identified in 2.2 have been evaluated for health and/or safety hazards. In 2.4, once the hazards have been identified in 2.3, they must be assessed based on severity and likelihood. Auditors must ensure that the health and safety hazards identified in 2.3 have all been assessed for risk. And then in 2.5, the senior manager interviewees must be knowledgeable of the highest hazard tasks related to their operation. These would be identified in 2.4. For element 3, questions 3.1 to 3.4 focus on verifying that the hazard controls identified in element 2 are not only identified, but also effectively implemented. Please review the handout on the website, and it will expand on how to complete these questions as well. For 3.1, each identified hazard in 2.3 should have controls in place, such as engineering controls, such as guards or ventilation, administrative controls, which include policies or training, and PPE controls like gloves and eye protection. In 3.2, the engineering controls in 3.1 must be physically observed to ensure they are in use. In 3.3, the administrative controls identified in 3.1 will be confirmed implemented through documentation review. This could also include training records, job procedures, policies, etc. And in 3.4, PPE controls identified in 3.1 must be available and in use for the identified hazards and must be physically observed at the work sites. For element 6, in previous years, question 6.1 was often scored using a contractor policy, with contractors being noted as others not under the employer's direction. However, contractors are under the direction of the employer and are not to be used to answer question 6.1. Some examples of other worksite parties could include members of the public and or other persons in the vicinity of the worksite, family visiting residents as well as visitors to the facility, specialized medical services. For example, blood work is ordered for collection for a specific resident, physical therapy or occupational therapy. Speech comes to the facility to work with a resident. Could also be personal care services, such as an independent hairstylist who operates within the space of the facility but is not hired by the facility. So they rent the space to operate out of. Could also be mobile personal services, such as massage, hair, or manicure pedicure are arranged and delivered to the resident's unit. It could also be mail carriers. Moving on to data gathering, start and end dates. Your data gathering period begins in one of two ways, either the start date of the pre-audit meeting or the date that the auditor begins documentation review. For the purpose of gathering, which of these is first is the audit start date and begins the 45-day data collection period. A site familiarization tour is an optional tour of the facility with your audit contact. This is helpful if you've never visited the facility or if you haven't been there in a while. During the site familiarization tour, you can locate the restrooms, where the exits are, and where you'll be working in the facility. Then, DIO will take place in that order, followed by the post-audit meeting. One of the main issues we see in QA reviews is failure to meet the timelines. Data gathering cannot exceed 45 days. The audit officially begins with a pre-audit meeting. This is also typically the start of the data gathering activities unless the organization has provided electronic documentation to review in advance of the pre-audit meeting. If the auditor requested electronic documentation prior to the on-site activities, as soon as they receive the documents and begin to review them, the 45-day period starts. A reminder that your report writing cannot exceed 21 days. The audit report must be submitted to the CCSA COR Team via AuditSoft no more than 66 days after the audit start date. For QA revisions, there is a maximum of 15 days per revision. Auditors must achieve a minimum QA score of 80%, along with a maximum of 2 QA revisions. Overall, QA revisions cannot take more than 90 days total. One of the responsibilities of being an auditor is communicating with your certifying partner if any deadlines may be exceeded. In the event you project your timelines may be exceeded, you must contact us as soon as possible and before the deadline is exceeded. We provide reminders throughout this process, but auditors must ensure to adhere to the deadline. And please note that data gathering cannot go past December 31st as per the partnership standards. Now on to interviews. The easiest way to look at each level is to determine what they do. Do not assume because their title says supervisor or manager that they automatically are. Look at RN versus LPNs. Does one supervise the other? Do you have RN workers and RN supervisors? Remember to review your request for information data to determine whether each position is listed according to its OHS function in the worker, supervisor, manager, senior manager roles. A worker is any person engaged in a job who is not a manager or a supervisor, and this may include volunteers. A supervisor is a person in charge of or directing the activities of workers. Supervisor is a function, not necessarily a job or job title. The manager is a person who directs and or supervises the affairs of a business, office, or an organization. And the senior manager is the most senior person or persons accountable for the operation under the scope of the audit. Justification notes. Your justification note should include one key strength per element, one key SFI for any audit question scoring less than 80%, or one key SFI for any element scoring less than 100%. And remember, ensure your justification note includes evidence as to why the score was awarded. Auditor notes. To recap, auditor notes must reflect the question guidelines are being followed, be consistent with the notes and score awarded for other related questions, indicate the validation technique or techniques used to score the question, indicate the results for each technique. if more than one validation is required to score a question. Indicate what documentation was reviewed, what observations were completed, and provide interview findings. Include reference to specific examples details, and include quantification to support the note for each validation technique. And remember, cohort breakdowns for interview questions scoring less than 90% are no longer required. Remember, in your justification note, you are justifying the points or explaining why you have awarded. Make sure to include what documents you reviewed, who you interviewed, what you saw, and examples, both positive and negative. And remember, justification notes cannot include I think or I feel statements, direct reference to a specific employee or name, personal opinions, restatement of the audit question in the affirmative as the only justification, contradictory information, or boilerplated or templated notes. This includes copying and pasting large sections of company policies and procedures directly into your audit report. Moving on to external auditor standards. To maintain your external auditor certification, you must abide by the following. You must adhere to the Auditor Code of Ethics, attend Auditor Refresher training once every 3 years, submit one CCSA audit annually, achieve 90% or better on the QA review, sign the Auditor Code of Ethics once every 3 years, and submit a criminal record check once every 3 years. Please note that for criminal record checks, these do not have to be vulnerable sector. Just a regular criminal record check will suffice. Best practices and external auditor standards. These are some additional best practices and external auditor standards. Documentation review must be finished before interviews or observations can begin. The information you acquire through documentation review is utilized to confirm what you are told in interviews. Similarly, the information you acquire through documentation review and interview responses are utilized to confirm what you observe is meeting the related core audit question criteria. There is no exceptions to the order of DIO. Conducting site sampling and interview sampling. It is the expectation that our external auditors complete their site and interview independently and only ask their CP for feedback on specific areas in the sampling. If you are completing your interview and or site sampling and you come across something you need further clarification on, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. That said, it is not necessary for external auditors to have their interview and site sampling pre-approved by the COR team. The expectation is that our certified external auditors can demonstrate the competencies related to the audit processes. Ongoing professional development and continuous improvement. With changes such as the AuditSoft partnership and legislation changes, we want to remind CCSA certified external auditors that ongoing professional development is a part of the certified designation of being an auditor, whether as part of a professional designation such as a CRSP or your own commitment to improving as a certified external auditor. You should identify an area of opportunity to grow and improve your knowledge and skills. It is the expectation of our external auditors that each commits to the continuous improvement of their own ongoing professional development and positively engages in new processes and projects. The expectation of an auditor is to be competent in all aspects of professionalism. The auditor reviews health and safety management system documentation, interviews senior management, managers, supervisors, workers, and contractors, conducts observation tours, confirms that certain actions have been completed, objectively analyzes information, and draws conclusions about the strengths and weaknesses of the health and safety management system, and makes meaningful suggestions to the organization for improving their health and safety management system. Dangerous work situations. How do auditors handle situations of dangerous work they identify or workers bring to their attention while conducting an audit? Auditors do not have the authority to stop work or issue stop use orders. Therefore, if a worker or the auditor identifies a dangerous work situation during the audit, the auditor should immediately bring the situation to the attention of the manager or supervisor. Internal auditors, particularly those in management or supervisory positions, may be able to ask workers to stop what they are doing, depending on the organization and the reporting relationship. However, Their ability to stop work is due to their position within the organization, not their role as an auditor. Knowledge. What we mean by the term knowledge is the theoretical understanding of the subject. Auditors must have a good understanding of the 10 elements required in a PIR-compliant health and safety management system, the purpose of each element, what is involved in the element, and how it's implemented. Auditors must have the necessary knowledge to apply the CCSA audit tool objectively. Auditors should be familiar with the minimum standards for health and safety in the workplace, for example, the Alberta Occupational Health and Safety Act, regulation, and code. Understanding the legislation can help the auditor assess how well the organization is managing health and safety. However, an auditor is not a compliance officer. Accountabilities of the auditor. Comply with the Auditor Code of Ethics at all times. Conduct the audit according to standards and requirements. Produce an audit report that meets all requirements and provides complete information that the auditor is prepared to defend. Ensure all timelines are met. Submit the audit report to the CCSA and ensure it has been received. Complete and submit any required corrections or redrafts based on the quality assurance review. Submit the final audit report to the employer once the quality assurance review has been received, stating that the audit is accepted. Failure to follow through on accountabilities could result in the employer losing their COR. All CCSA certified auditors must adhere to the Auditor's Code of Ethics at all times and avoid any potential conflict of interest situations. Potential conflict of interest situations are detailed in the Auditor's Code of Ethics and must be avoided by all auditors. COR certification audits that were conducted while a conflict of interest existed are deemed unacceptable. Should an external auditor be uncomfortable conducting an audit due to personal connections, then the employer must select another external auditor to conduct the audit. Be mindful that the relationship you have with the organization and the employer is a professional relationship, and any opinions you share with the employer should be strictly related to the COR audit itself. The auditor information sheet, which includes the privacy, confidentiality, conflict of interest, and disclaimer statement, must be completed with each submitted audit report. Each auditor who participated in the audit must read and adhere to the disclaimer statement. All auditors are required to sign the Auditor Code of Ethics Agreement at auditor training and then at minimum every 3 years at the Auditor Refresher training. Most audits are submitted in November, which can mean longer wait times, so help the CCS out by getting them in earlier if you can. Getting them in earlier means we can provide more hands-on support and issues can be more easily dealt with. Our QA times are at the maximum turnaround time in November during peak season, so whenever possible, please submit your audit earlier if you can. If you have not already done so, please subscribe to our website in the top right corner. You can subscribe to the CCSA's audit and COR monthly e-news. COR Connections is where we keep everyone updated on changes regarding COR updates, reminders for registering your audit, training, AuditSoft, audit tips, etc. We hope you found this webinar helpful and you have reached your learning goal. Thank you for attending today. Please follow us on our social media for updates. We are on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. For questions on health and safety training, please contact OHS at ab-ccsa.ca. For questions on COR auditing, please contact COR at ab-ccsa.ca. And as stated, we value your feedback. If you want to provide feedback on this presentation, please email us at cor@ab-ccsa.ca. If you need access to any of the links throughout this video, please email us at the same email. Have a safe and happy day. Take care.